The chamber of stars had existed for 12 billion years. It floated in a pocket of space between galaxies, hidden from the eyes of younger species. The walls were made of frozen light, and the floor was a window into the void itself. 7 thrones circled a platform of pure energy, each one shaped for beings that had long forgotten what physical form truly meant. The Eternal Council was gathering, and this was never a good sign. Aura arrived first. She was not a creature of flesh and blood. She had evolved beyond such limitations 8 billion years ago. Now she existed as living crystal, her thoughts forming patterns of light that danced through her transparent body. She took her place on the throne of frozen starlight and waited. Came next. He was ancient even by eternal standards. His body was made of living metal that had been forged in the heart of the first star ever born. He moved slowly, deliberately, each step sending ripples through the fabric of space itself. He had witnessed the birth of galaxies. He had watched species rise from single cells to cosmic powers. Nothing surprised him anymore. One by one, the other Eternals arrived. There was a being of pure mathematics whose body was made of equations that constantly solved and reformed themselves. There was the Whisper, a creature that existed in sound waves and spoke in frequencies that could shatter planets. There was Old Gray, the eldest of them all, who appeared as nothing more than a faint shadow that bent light around itself. When all 7 were assembled, Aura began to speak. Her voice was like wind chimes made of ice. "I have called this gathering because of the humans," she said. The reaction was immediate, made a sound like grinding gears, which was his way of sighing. A's equations flickered with annoyance. The Whisper hummed at a frequency that meant boredom. "The humans again," said. "That infant species from the spiral arm, what have they done now?" "Colony World 22b," Aura answered. "Complete ecological collapse. The star entered an unstable phase. Radiation storms have made the surface uninhabitable. The atmosphere has become toxic. The soil is poisoned." Old Gray shifted slightly. "Then they are dead, as expected. Their species is barely 200,000 years old. They had no chance." "That is the problem," Aura said. "They are not dead." Silence fell over the chamber of stars. Even the Whisper stopped humming. "Explain," demanded. "I cannot explain. That is why I called this gathering. By every model, every calculation, every precedent in our combined 12 billion years of observation, the humans should be extinct. The conditions on 22b are lethal. No species without advanced evolutionary adaptations could survive. The humans have no telepathy to coordinate rescue efforts. They have no dimensional shifting to escape the planet. They have no radiation immunity. They have no extended to wait out the crisis. They have nothing." "And yet they live," Old Gray said. It was not a question. "And yet they live. Not only do they live, but they are thriving. They have established underground shelters. They are growing food. They are treating the sick. They are even educating their young." Rose from his throne. The living metal of his body caught the light of distant stars. "This is impossible. I have seen 10,000 species face lesser challenges. The of Andromeda had natural radiation immunity and advanced technology. They died when their sun flickered for a single century. The dreaming ones could exist outside of time itself. They gave up after they're cooled. How can these humans, these fragile creatures who die after barely a century of life, possibly survive what would kill immortals?" "I do not know," Aura admitted. "That is why I propose we observe them directly." The suggestion sent shockwaves through the council. The Eternals did not observe. They did not interfere. They had long ago decided that younger species were beneath their notice. What was the point of watching mayflies live and die? "This is beneath us," A said, her equation body forming symbols of dismissal. "Let them die or live as they will. It does not concern beings of our standing." "I disagree," Old Gray said. The shadow that was his form grew darker. "In 12 billion years I have never seen anything I could not explain. This troubles me. Aura is right. We must observe." The vote was close, but in the end, curiosity won over pride. The Eternal Council decided to send a delegation to 22B. 3 days later, a human ship arrived at the Chamber of Stars. It was small, barely larger than a grain of sand compared to the structures the Eternals could create. It should not have been able to find this place. It should not have been able to survive the journey. And yet, there it was. A woman stepped out of the ship. She was young by any standard, barely 32 years old. Her name was, and she was Earth's ambassador to species that humans had not yet officially met. She wore a simple gray uniform. Her black hair was tied back in a practical style. She looked at the Eternal Council without fear. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," she said. Her voice was calm and steady. "I understand you have questions about our colony." Leaned forward on his throne. He was a being of living metal who had existed since the first stars ignited. He had watched civilizations rise and fall like waves on a cosmic ocean. And yet, something about this small, fragile creature made him uneasy. "We do not understand how your people survive," he said. "We have observed your species for some time. You are weak. You are short-lived. You have no natural defenses against the hazards of space. By every measure, you should be among the weakest beings in the galaxy." Smiled. It was a strange expression, one that the Eternals had never quite understood. It showed teeth like a threat display, but the meaning was something else entirely. "With respect," she said, "I think you are measuring the wrong things." "Then enlighten us, child. What should we measure?" Thought for a moment. She knew she was standing before beings older than most stars. She knew that her entire species was like a newborn infant compared to them. She knew that everything she said would be judged against 12 billion years of experience. She decided to be honest. "You should come see for yourselves," she said. "I could explain it in words, but you would not believe me. You need to see what humans do when the universe tells us to die." The Eternals exchanged looks through dimensions that humans could not perceive. They communicated in ways that transcended language. In moments, they reached a decision. "Very well," Aura said. "We will come, we will observe, and perhaps we will finally understand what makes your species so persistent." Smile widened. "I hope so, because honestly I am not sure we understand it ourselves. We just do what we have always done." "And what is that?" Old Gray asked. Turned toward her ship. She paused at the entrance and looked back at the oldest beings in the universe. "We survive," she said simply. "No matter what, we survive." The Eternals watched her go. They had seen the rise and fall of empires that span galaxies. They had witnessed the birth and death of stars beyond counting. They had thought themselves beyond surprise, beyond wonder, beyond curiosity. They were wrong. 3 days later, the delegation departed for 22B. They expected to find death and despair. They expected to finally see the humans break under pressure that had destroyed far mightier species. They had no idea what they were about to witness. The delegation of Eternals materialized on the surface of 22B and immediately understood why the colony should be dead. The sky was wrong. It burned with colors that no healthy atmosphere should produce. Green lightning crackled across clouds of toxic gas. The radiation was so intense that Smed's metal body began to heat despite his natural immunity. The wind carried particles that would shred unprotected flesh in seconds. Aura scanned the surface with senses that could perceive individual atoms. The soil was poison. The water was acid. The air was death. Nothing should live here. Nothing could live here. And yet beneath their feet she detected life signs. Thousands of them. "The underground complex is this way," said. She wore a heavy radiation suit that made her look like a white beetle. "Please follow me." The Eternals phased through the ground itself, following the human woman as she made her way to an airlock built into a rocky hillside. The airlock was crude by their standards. It was made of salvaged ship parts and welded metal. It should not have worked. But when entered the codes, the door opened smoothly. Inside, the Eternals found something they had not seen in billions of years. They found hope. The underground complex stretched for kilometers in every direction. It had been carved from solid rock using mining equipment meant for asteroid operations. The walls were rough and unfinished. The lighting was dim because power was precious. The air was recycled so many times that it tasted flat and metallic. But it was alive. Humans moved through the corridors with purpose. They carried tools and supplies. They talked and laughed and argued. Children ran past the eternal delegation, chasing each other in some game that involved a ball made of wrapped cloth. An old man sat in a corner, teaching a group of teenagers how to repair water filtration systems. Lieutenant met them at the main junction. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and a face marked by scars. He walked with a limp from an injury he had received during the first days of the crisis. His left arm was mechanical, a replacement built from spare parts after an accident in the reactor room. By all rights, he should have been dead 3 times over. Instead, he was smiling. "Welcome to New Hope Colony," he said. "Sorry about the mess. We have been busy." Studied the human with sensors that could analyze molecular structures. The man's body was damaged. His heart had an irregular rhythm. His lungs showed signs of radiation exposure. He should be in a medical facility, not walking around giving tour. "You are injured," observed. "Why are you not resting?" Laughed. It was a strange sound, unexpected in a place of such hardship. "Rest is for people who do not have work to do. Come on, I will show you around." He led them through the complex, pointing out different sections with obvious pride. Here was the hydroponics bay, where genetically modified crops grew under artificial lights. The plants had been altered to survive the toxic conditions that sometimes leaked through the walls. A woman named was tending to them, carefully checking each leaf for signs of contamination. "We lost the first 3 harvests," explained. "The radiation kept getting in, figured out how to modify the plants to absorb it instead of dying. Now they actually help clean the air." Looked up from her work. She was young, maybe 25, with dirt under her fingernails and exhaustion in her eyes. But when she spoke, her voice was steady. "The tomatoes are coming in next week," she said. "Real tomatoes. The kids have never tasted fresh vegetables before, only the synthesized stuff." Aura could not understand. "You have been living on synthesized nutrition for how long?" 8 months now, since the atmosphere collapsed. "And you modified crops to survive these conditions in only 8 months." Shrugged. "We did not have a choice. The synthesizers are failing. If we do not grow real food soon, we starve, so we figured it out." The tour continued. They visited the medical bay, where doctor was treating patients under lights that flickered every few minutes. The equipment was old and damaged. Half the beds were occupied by people suffering from radiation sickness. A little boy with bandages on his arms was telling jokes to make a crying girl laugh. Did not stop working as she spoke to the Eternals. Her hands moved with practiced precision, cleaning a wound, applying medicine, checking vital signs. "We lost our chief surgeon in the first quake," she said. "I was a general practitioner before this. I learned surgery from video files and old textbooks. My first operation was removing shrapnel from a man's spine. I was terrified. I did not sleep for 3 days after." "And now?" asked. "Now I have done 47 surgeries. We have lost 4 patients. I remember every single one of their names." She finally looked up at the ancient being. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but they burned with something fierce. "I will not lose any more if I can help it." A's equation body flickered with calculations. "The probability of survival in these conditions, with these resources, with your level of technology, it approaches 0. How have you not given up?" Smiled that strange human smile. "Giving up is not an option. These people need me, so I keep going, that is all." The Eternals visited the school next. It was held in a reinforced bunker, the safest place in the complex. 23 children sat on the floor, listening to a teacher named Explain Basic Mathematics. On the wall behind her, someone had painted a mural of Earth, blue and green and beautiful. Most of these children were born here, said. They have never seen Earth. They have never felt real sunlight or breathed unfiltered air. But we teach them everything we can. Mathematics, science, history, art. Why art? The whisper asked, his voice a gentle hum. What purpose does art serve in survival? Looked at the ancient being with something like pity. Because survival is not enough. We do not just want to live, we want to live well. We want to create beauty and meaning and joy, even in the darkness, especially in the darkness. A small girl tugged its sleeve. She could not have been more than 6 years old. Teacher, who are the shiny people? Smiled and knelt down to the child's level. They are visitors, very old and very wise visitors who have come to learn about us. Looked at with wide eyes. Are you a robot? A being of living metal who had witnessed the birth of galaxies found himself without words. No, I am not a robot. Oh, you look like a robot. A nice robot, though. She smiled at him, then ran back to her seat to continue her lessons. Was grinning. She is not wrong, you do kind of look like a robot. For the first time in 8 billion years, did not know how to respond. That night, the Eternals gathered in an empty storage room to discuss what they had seen. They had expected death and despair. They had expected to finally witness the moment when humans broke under impossible pressure. Instead, they had found something else entirely. They should not be alive, Aura said. The conditions here are lethal. Their technology is primitive. Their bodies are fragile. Everything is against them. And yet they laugh, said slowly. They teach children, they grow tomatoes, they make art. Old Gray's shadow form darkened with thought. In 12 billion years, I have never seen anything like this. Species with godlike powers have crumbled under far less pressure. What do these humans have that others do not? None of them had an answer, but they were beginning to understand that they had been asking the wrong questions all along. On the 7th day of observation, the Eternals were invited to something the humans called a community gathering. Explained that it happened once a week, in the largest chamber of the underground complex. Everyone was expected to attend unless they had emergency duties. Aura did not understand the purpose. Her species had evolved beyond the need for physical assembly billions of years ago. Communication happened instantly across any distance through crystalline resonance. Why would beings gather in one place just to be together? You will see, said with that strange human smile. It is hard to explain, you just have to experience it. The main chamber was carved from dark stone. Rough pillars supported a ceiling lost in shadows. Someone had strung lights between the pillars, creating a soft glow that made the space feel warm despite the cold rock. Hundreds of humans crowded into the room, sitting on the floor, leaning against walls, standing in small groups. The Eternals positioned themselves at the back, trying not to disturb the gathering. They watched as families arranged themselves together. They saw friends embracing after long shifts in different parts of the complex. They observed children sitting on parents' laps, elderly people being helped to comfortable spots. Food was passed around. It was simple stuff, mostly synthesized proteins shaped into different forms. But people shared it freely, making sure everyone had something. A woman gave her portion to a thin man who looked sick. A teenager split his food with a younger boy who seemed sad. Why do they share? I asked, her equations flickering with confusion. Resources are limited. Logic dictates that each individual should maximize their own consumption. Watch, said. A man stood at the front of the chamber. His name was, and he was the colony's chief engineer. His clothes were stained with grease and his face was tired. He raised his hand and the crowd fell silent. Before we begin, he said, I want to recognize some people. First, the night shift team who fixed the water recyclers yesterday. We would all be very thirsty without them. A small group of people stood up. The crowd clapped and cheered. The engineers looked embarrassed but pleased. Second, Doctor and her medical team. We lost power in the hospital wing for 3 hours last night. They kept every patient alive using backup supplies and pure determination. Thank you. More applause. Waved from her spot near the front, where she sat with her exhausted medical staff. And finally, continued, his voice growing softer, I want to remember those we have lost this week. Grandmother Bora asked me to read their names. He pulled out a small piece of paper. The chamber became completely silent. Parks Lee Menu. 3 names, 3 people who had died in the past 7 days, 1 from radiation sickness, 1 from a collapsed tunnel, 1 from a heart that simply gave out after too much stress. A woman in the crowd began to cry softly. Someone put an arm around her shoulders. Others bowed their heads or closed their eyes. We remember them, said. We carry them with us. Their sacrifice means something because we are still here. He stepped aside and an old woman made her way to the front. She walked slowly, supported by a wooden cane that someone had carved for her. Her name was Grandmother Bora, and she was 93 years old. She was one of the original colonists, born on Earth in a city called Seoul. The Eternals had noticed her before. She spent most of her time with the children, telling stories and teaching songs. Her body was failing. She had refused medical intervention that might extend her life by a few months. Save the resources for the young, she had said. I have lived enough. Now she stood before her people, small and frail, but somehow commanding attention from every person in the room. I want to tell you about where I come from, she began. Her voice was weak, but in the silence every word carried. I want to tell you about Korea. She spoke of a peninsula on Earth, a small piece of land between mountains and sea. She told them about a people who had faced invasion after invasion throughout their history. Empires had tried to conquer them. Armies had tried to destroy them. Wars had divided their land in two. My grandmother, Bora said, was born during the Japanese occupation. She was not allowed to speak her own language. She was not allowed to use her own name. They tried to erase everything that made her Korean. The old woman's eyes were distant, seeing memories from long ago. But she remembered. She kept the old songs alive by singing them in secret. She passed the language to her children, whispering it at night when no one could hear. She never forgot who she was, no matter what they did to her. She paused, gathering her strength. My mother was born during the war. She remembered the bombs and the fire and the endless running. She remembered watching her city burn. She remembered eating grass because there was no food. She was 5 years old when she learned what hunger really meant. Someone in the crowd sobbed. Others held hands. But they rebuilt. They took a country that had been destroyed and made it strong again. Not once, not twice. Many times throughout history. Every time someone knocked them down, they got back up. Every time someone said they were finished, they proved them wrong. Grandmother Bora looked out at her people. These humans who lived underground on a poisoned world, who faced death every day, who had every reason to give up. That is who we are, she said. That is who you are. We are the children of people who survived the impossible. We carry their strength in our blood. When the universe tells us to die, we refuse. When hope seems lost, we find more. This is what it means to be human. She raised her thin arms, and her voice grew stronger. We have lost our sky. We have lost our sun. We have lost friends and family, but we have not lost ourselves. As long as one of us remains standing, we have not lost. As long as one of us keeps fighting, we have not failed. The crowd began to sing. It started soft, just a few voices, but it grew. It was an old song, something from Earth that the colonists had carried with them across the stars. The melody was sad and beautiful and defiant all at once. It spoke of loss and longing and the refusal to surrender. The Eternals stood frozen, had heard the harmonics of collapsing stars. Aura had witnessed the frequencies of forming black holes. The Whisper had experienced sounds that could shatter planets. None of them had ever encountered anything like this. "What is happening?" asked. His voice was strange, uncertain. "What is this sensation?" Aura's crystalline form flickered with colors she had not displayed in eons. "I believe," she said slowly, "the humans call it hope. They are creating hope out of nothing, out of songs and stories and memories." "But that is impossible," I protested. "Hope is an emotion tied to probability. The probability of their survival is nearly zero. They should feel despair, not hope." Old Gray's shadow deepened until it was almost solid. "They know the probabilities as well as we do. They simply refuse to accept them." The song ended. People were crying and laughing at the same time. They held each other, drawing strength from physical contact. Children had fallen asleep in their parents' arms. The elderly leaned on the young. Everyone touched someone else. Grandmother Bora had returned to her seat. A young girl sat beside her, holding her wrinkled hand. The old woman was telling her another story, something about her childhood in Seoul, about cherry blossoms in spring and the smell of street food. The Eternals watched until the gathering ended and people drifted back to their duties. They had witnessed something they could not explain. They had felt something they could not name. And for the first time in 12 billion years, they began to understand why humans were different. The disaster came 3 months after the Eternals began their observation. It started with a tremor so small that only the most sensitive instruments detected it. Then another. Then another. Deep beneath the surface of 22B, something was shifting. The planet's core, already destabilized by the radiation storms above, had reached a critical point. Felt it first. His body of living metal resonated with the stone around him. He turned to Aura with alarm in his ancient eyes. "The planet is breaking," he said. The first real earthquake hit 17 seconds later. The underground complex shook like a toy in the hands of an angry child. Walls cracked. Ceilings collapsed. The carefully maintained systems that kept thousands of humans alive began to fail one by one. The main reactor went critical, and his team rushed to contain it, but an explosion ripped through the engineering section before they could reach the controls. 3 engineers died instantly. 2 more were badly injured. The reactor stabilized on backup systems, but power dropped to 40%. In the medical bay, Doctor was thrown to the floor as the room shook violently. Equipment fell from shelves. A cabinet full of precious medicine shattered against the wall. She got to her feet with blood running down her face from a cut on her forehead and immediately began directing her staff. "Move the critical patients to the reinforced ward. Priority is the children and the pregnant women. Go, go, go." The school bunker held, but barely. Gathered her students in the center of the room, away from the walls. She kept her voice calm even as dust rained down from the ceiling. "Everyone hold hands. We are going to be fine. Just hold hands and do not let go." Little, the girl who had called a nice robot, was crying. An older boy named put his arm around her and started singing one of the songs from the community gatherings. Other children joined in. Their small voices rose above the rumbling of the dying planet. Grandmother Bora was not in the bunker. She had been walking to the medical bay when the quake hit. A section of corridor collapsed directly in her path, trapping a group of children who had been running to safety. The Eternals watched from their dimensional pocket as the old woman assessed the situation. She was 93 years old. Her body was failing. She could barely walk without her cane. There was nothing she could do. She did something anyway. "Climb through here," she said, pointing to a small gap in the rubble. "One at a time, quickly now." The children were scared. They did not want to move. Grandmother Bora did what she had always done. She told them a story. Did I ever tell you about my great-grandmother? She lived through a great flood when she was your age. The water came so fast that everyone thought they would die, but she found a way out. She climbed and climbed until she reached safety. You can do the same. I believe in you. One by one, the children squeezed through the gap. 7 of them made it to safety on the other side. But the 8th, a boy named, was too big. He was stuck. Another tremor shook the corridor. The rubble began to shift. In seconds, the gap would close completely, crushing the boy. Grandmother Bora did not hesitate. She braced her frail body against the largest piece of debris and pushed with everything she had left. "Go," she said through gritted teeth. "Go now." Scrambled through, the rubble shifted, the gap closed. When the rescue team arrived an hour later, they found Grandmother Bora's body beneath the collapsed ceiling. She had died saving 8 children who would never forget her. The earthquakes continued for 6 hours. 17 colonists died. 43 were seriously injured. The main water recycler was destroyed. The food storage took heavy damage. Power fluctuated wildly as remaining engineers fought to keep the reactor stable. The Eternals observed from orbit as the colony's situation went from desperate to catastrophic. They had their rescue ships ready. They had seen this moment countless times before, the breaking point when species gave up. Lieutenant had been in the engineering section when the first quake hit. His leg was shattered again, the bone snapping cleanly below the knee. His mechanical arm was damaged beyond repair. He could not walk, could barely move. He directed rescue operations from a stretcher. Team 3, Sector 7 needs reinforcement. Team 5, priority search in the residential areas. Someone get me a damage report from medical. A young woman named tried to get him to rest. "Lieutenant, you need surgery. Your leg is completely broken." "I will get surgery when everyone is accounted for. How many are we missing?" 12, including Grandmother Bora. Closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they were wet. "Keep searching. No one gets left behind." In the medical bay, doctor performed surgery by flashlight when the power failed. Her hands were steady even as the floor shook beneath her feet. A man named had a piece of metal embedded in his chest, millimeters from his heart. One wrong move would kill him. "I need someone to hold the light steady," she said. "Can you do it?" Was 15 years old. He had been training as a medical assistant for 6 months. His hands were shaking. "I do not know if I can," he said. Met his eyes. "I know you can, I believe in you. Now hold the light." He held the light. She removed the metal, survived. The communication array was destroyed in the 3rd major tremor. Without it, the colony could not contact Earth or any other human settlements. They were alone. Was 19 years old. She had been training as a communications technician for 2 years. She knew the array better than anyone still alive. "I can fix it," she told. "The main transmitter is still intact. The damage is to the external antenna. I just need to go outside and reconnect it." Stared at her. "Outside, the radiation levels are off the scale. Your suit is damaged. You would be exposed for at least 20 minutes. "I know. You could die. You probably will die." "I know." Wanted to forbid it. He wanted to find another way. But there was no other way. Without communications, help would never come. Without help, everyone would die eventually. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you do this?" Thought for a moment. "Because if I do not, everyone loses hope. They need to know that someone is coming. They need to hear that we are not alone. That is worth my life." She went outside. The radiation was worse than anyone had predicted. Her suit began to fail within 5 minutes. She could feel the burning in her lungs, the weakness spreading through her limbs. Her hands trembled as she worked on the antenna. Aura materialized beside her. The ancient being could have fixed the antenna herself in seconds. She could have shielded from the radiation. Instead, she asked a question. "Why are you doing this? You are one being. Your individual survival should be your priority. This is irrational. Did not stop working. Because the others need to know we are still alive. Because my mother is down there and my little brother. Because giving up is not who we are. But you will die. Finally looked at the Eternal. Her face was pale, her eyes bloodshot from radiation exposure. She was already dying. Maybe, probably, but I would rather die trying than live knowing I did not. She reconnected the final cable. The antenna powered on. A signal went out into the darkness, telling the universe that the colony of 22B was still there, still fighting, still alive. Collapsed. The Eternals transported her back inside immediately. She survived, but barely. The radiation had burned years off her life. She would never fully recover. When she woke up 2 days later, the first thing she asked was whether the signal got through. It did, told her. Help is coming, 3 ships are on the way. Smiled, it hurt to smile, it hurt to breathe, but she smiled anyway. Good, she said, that is good. The Eternals had their answer now. They understood what made humans different, but understanding and believing were 2 different things. They needed to see how this ended. 1 year passed. The colony of 22B did not die. 3 rescue ships arrived within 2 weeks of transmission. They brought supplies, equipment, and fresh personnel. Engineers from Earth helped stabilize the reactor. Medical teams treated the sick and injured. Construction crews began building new shelters deeper underground, away from the unstable zones. But the colonists did not leave. They had been given the choice. Every single one of them could have boarded the ships and returned to Earth or transferred to a safer colony. Instead, they chose to stay. "This is our home," said when asked. His leg had been rebuilt with proper medical technology. He could walk again, though he would always have a slight limp. "We bled for this place. We lost people we loved here. We are not going to abandon it now." The colony grew. New families arrived, drawn by stories of survival and resilience. Scientists came to study the unique conditions. Engineers came to test new technologies. Artists came to document the human spirit in one of its forms. A monument was built in the main chamber. It contained the names of everyone who had died during the crisis. Grandmother Bora's name was at the top. Below the names was a simple inscription. "They held the light so we could find our way." Little, now 7 years old, placed flowers at the monument every week. She had learned to grow them herself in the expanded hydroponics bay. She said it was to thank Grandmother Bora for her stories. Recovered slowly. The radiation damage could not be fully repaired. She would never live as long as she should have. But she continued working in communications, training the next generation of technicians. "Someone has to teach them," she said. "Someone has to show them that sacrifice means something." 1 year after the crisis, the Eternal Council reconvened in the Chamber of Stars. All 7 of the oldest beings in the universe gathered once more to discuss the humans. Ambassador stood before them again. She looked the same as she had a year ago, still young, still small, still fragile, but something in her eyes had changed. She had seen what her people could do. She had seen it with her own eyes. "You wish to understand our strength," she said. "Have you found your answer?" The Eternals were silent for a long moment. They communicated in dimensions beyond human perception, debating amongst themselves. Finally, Aura spoke. "We have existed since the universe was young," she said. Her crystalline form pulsed with colors that were hard to read. "We have seen things that would drive mortal minds to madness. We have witnessed the birth and death of stars beyond counting. We believed ourselves to be the ultimate expression of cosmic development. We thought we had seen everything." She paused. "We were wrong." Spoke next. His voice of grinding metal was softer than usual. "Your species has no natural advantages. Your bodies are weak. You are brief. You have no telepathy, no dimensional abilities, no cosmic awareness. By every measure we use to evaluate species, you should be among the weakest in the galaxy. And yet, Old Gray said, his shadow form darker than the void itself, you persist. You do more than persist. You thrive in conditions that would break beings far more powerful than yourselves. The whisper hummed at frequencies that expressed profound confusion. We watched a woman crush herself beneath rubble to save children. We watched a girl burn years off her life to send a signal. We watched a man direct rescue operations with broken bones. These actions do not follow any logic we understand. They are not supposed to be logical, said quietly. They are human. Aura drifted closer to the human ambassador. Despite being a being of pure crystalline thought who had existed for billions of years, she felt something new, something strange, something that might have been respect. We finally understand, she said. Your strength is not physical, it is not technological, it is not even intellectual, it is something else entirely. What is it? Asked. You refuse to accept reality as it is. When the universe tells you to die, you laugh and build hospitals. When probability demands your extinction, you sing songs and tell stories and hold each other in the darkness. You take your fear and transform it into courage. You take your grief and forge it into determination. Aura's light grew brighter than it had been in eons. We have seen species with godlike powers crumble at the first sign of hardship. We have seen immortals give up after mere centuries of struggle. But you brief and fragile creatures, you fight for each other with a ferocity that defies comprehension. You love with an intensity that terrifies us. You hope when hope is mathematically absurd. Felt tears forming in her eyes. We are just doing what we have always done, what we learned from our ancestors, what we will teach our children. Yes, Old Gray said, and that is precisely what makes you the most remarkable species we have ever encountered, because you will never stop. No matter what the universe throws at you, no matter how many times you fall, no matter how impossible the odds, you will always get back up. You will always reach for each other. You will always fight for tomorrow. A's equation body had stopped trying to calculate humans. Some things, she had learned, could not be reduced to numbers. We have observed countless species, she said. We have watched them rise and fall like waves in a cosmic ocean. Most of them followed predictable patterns. They achieved a certain level of power, encountered a challenge beyond their abilities, and either adapted or perished. The survivors eventually reached a plateau and stopped growing. But you are different. You never stop. You never accept limits. You look at the impossible and say, not yet. You look at death and say, not today. You look at the darkness and light a candle, no matter how small. The Eternal Council made an unprecedented decision that day. They had originally gathered to observe humanity, perhaps to offer protection or guidance. They had thought of themselves as teachers, as elders watching over a young and foolish species. Now they understood differently. We do not offer you protection, Aura announced. We do not offer you guidance. Instead, we ask for something we have never asked of any species in 12 billion years. What do you ask? Said. We ask for an alliance, not as elders and children but as equals, because you have something we do not, something we had forgotten, something we desperately need. What is that? Old Gray answered. His voice was the whisper of empty space, the echo of everything that ever was or would be. Hope, he said, you have taught us hope. The alliance was formed that day. The oldest beings in the universe joined hands with one of the youngest species. It was an unlikely partnership, it all logic and precedent. But that was fitting. Humanity had never been about logic. Humanity had always been about something else. Back on 22B, the colony continued to grow. The radiation storms eventually subsided as scientists found ways to stabilize the atmosphere. The first children born after the crisis took their first steps under artificial lights, knowing nothing of the darkness that had come before. Lieutenant stood at the entrance to the surface for the first time in months. The sky was still strange, still wrong, but it was getting better. Someday, perhaps, it would be blue. Doctor stood beside him. Her hair had gone gray from stress and radiation exposure, but her hands were still steady. "Do you think they really understand us now?" she asked. "The Eternals." Smiled. "I think they are starting to. I think they finally see what Grandmother Bora always knew." "What is that?" "That we are not great despite our weakness. We are great because of it. Because we know how fragile life is, we fight for it. Because we know how short time is, we treasure it. Because we know how easily we can break, we hold each other up." Nodded slowly. She would have liked that, Grandmother Bora. She would have said it better. She always told the best stories. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the strange sky of their wounded world. "Do you think we will make it?" asked. "In the long run, I mean, as a species." Thought about Grandmother Bora, who had died so that children could live. He thought about who had given years of her life for a signal. He thought about every human who had ever refused to give up, from the ancient ancestors who had survived ice ages and famines to the colonists who had carved a home from hostile rock. "I do not know," he said honestly, "but I know we will never stop trying. No matter what happens, no matter how dark it gets, we will always reach for the light." Far above, in the Chamber of Stars, the Eternal Council watched the small blue dot that was 22B. They watched humans go about their lives, working and loving and hopping against all reason. And for the first time in 12 billion years, the oldest beings in the universe felt something they had forgotten was possible. They felt inspired. The end.